off and do my own thing. And I felt like I had enough experience under my belt at that point. All the business side of things and, marketing and all of that jazz has been new to me. So Whetstone Habitat is my company. I do wildlife habitat consulting and restoration. So I haven't first done myself. Like, that's one thing I joke about, where it's like, I've made all the mistakes so you don't have to. I got a native grasses and wildflowers blend that I'm working on that I'm super excited about, trying to keep things, keep them affordable, but be able to have quality habitat on the landscapes. Works that are going to be really exciting opportunities for Whetstone Habitat. So like you were saying, like I was preaching, this newsletter is going to be a great place to kind of keep up with all.
Tejas.
Still two.
Tejas Hunt Club Podcast is the podcast for you and you and you and you. What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 25 of the Tejas Hunt Club Podcast in the new and improving studio, as you can see. This week on the podcast, we're going to have my buddy Zack Vucurevich from Whetstone Habitat to come on the podcast. He's a wildlife biologist, and he has been all across the country studying different types of habitat for animals. He got his education at West Virginia University, but he grew up all across the country from Pennsylvania to Arizona. He even spent some time down here in Texas in the hill country working on a ranch down here, learning about that quality deer management. So this is going to be a real cool podcast. He's going to talk about his passion for the job that he has and what he can provide to different landowners as a consultant. He's also going to talk about his new newsletter that's going to be coming out weekly, Whetstone Weekly. It's going to cover different topics in wildlife management and habitat management, which he is very, very knowledgeable in. So you're going to hear that on this podcast. And then, like I said, if you want to learn about what more Zach can do for you, I'll have the link to his website and everything in the description of the podcast. And then also I'll have it pop up at the end as well, as we're talking to it in the podcast. And if you're not able to, hire him full outright, I suggest that you sign up for the newsletter to get some tips that you could be doing on your property. And like I said, Zach has a lot of knowledge. So all you listeners out there that want to improve or grow bigger deer, or even, have more songbirds or anything, he talks about a client that he has that's their focus, but anything that has to do with wildlife and habitat management, Zach's going to be your guy. So I hope you enjoy this podcast with him. I think it's got a lot of knowledge in it, and he's going to be a resource that I'm definitely going to tap into in the future. So a couple things before we get into the podcast, man. I've been seeing some things on social media, on Facebook and Instagram, of some bear sightings in Texas, and everybody knows that I love bears. I mean, even just seeing them would be cool. I mean, I want to hunt them, of course, but just being able to have those populations coming back in Texas is pretty cool, seeing how they are a native species, which a lot of people don't know. I saw some pictures in a video down in Carrizo Springs, so down in Southwest Texas, so that's pretty cool that they're showing up again. So I wanted to know a little bit more about like the history and things of bears in Texas. So I actually found out that there's the TBBA, the Texas Black Bear Alliance. It's a nonprofit organization, and their focus, I haven't really looked into them. I actually just found them when I was doing research for the podcast. But there looks to be that their mission statement here is Their mission statement here is they're a nonprofit coalition of state and federal and private industry and private citizens who seek to promote the restoration of black bears in suitable habitats through its historic range in Texas through cooperative partnerships using education, research, and habitat management. I can agree with all those things. Like I said, I'm gonna do some more research on this organization, but it's pretty cool to see these animals coming back to ranges, like they said, and that were native to them. I mean, they used to be all across the state, and I mean their website. I'll link that also in the description. It has a lot of history and stuff, kind of talking about the black bears. And I'm not gonna bore y'all, but if y'all want to, go check it out. But there were actually four subspecies of black bears once roamed the state of Texas. So the Louisiana black bear, of course, native to East Texas, the American black bear, which was found in Central and North Texas, and the Mexican black bear, down in South Texas, and the New Mexican black bear out, of course, out in West Texas as well. So those are the 4 subspecies that we had. And I think here they're saying that the ones that we're seeing now, I mean, them woods over in East Texas, I know are got to be holding some bears for sure, but they don't really see those as much. Most of the bear sightings that people have been catching are out in West Texas. There's a in Big Bend, I know for sure, because a lot of the sightings have been there, but even north of there, and then like the one that was last week or so, it was in Carrizo Springs. So they're spreading out pretty far. But yeah, judging, like you said, you can go to their website and check it out, but they have maps and everything showing where all the bears ranges were and all that kind of stuff. I'll screenshot and put it up here in the podcast. So yeah. And then, so that's real cool. Like I said, to see those bears coming back, and hopefully, they'll have a breeding population one day of black bears in Texas. Now that's going to come with some management issues, but I'm sure we'll hopefully figure out how to do that right. So when this podcast drops, I'm sure hopefully y'all guys will be either headed to the dove fields or in the dove fields listening to the podcast, which that'll be pretty cool. But the new effective September 1st, I know we got some new hunting laws and stuff that are coming out. Not too much this year from what I'm seeing. Got some CWD check stations and stuff that they're still holding on to. Buck and antlerless deer, mandatory harvest reporting for a couple counties, Collin, Dallas, Grayson, Rockwall counties, where in big deer, Chad Jones up there by you, Cable Smith too, Lone Star Outdoor Show. This is pretty cool. For hogs, aerial wildlife management permit holders are able to hunt feral hogs at night with the aid of drones. If any of you guys have that permit, I got a drone. We can hook up, kill some hogs. Let me know. We can work it out. But that's really it from new hunting laws here in the state of Texas. That's nice. You don't need too many more, unless they're warranted, of course. But something else cool, if you haven't seen, we posted on, I know Tejas Hunt Club, and I know Meagan posted it on her social and everything. She was actually profiled for Stewards of the Wild, member profile. So she got to they wrote a little article, did an interview and everything about her, kind of talking about what we do with Barb C Media, and then also spoke about the podcast and the listeners that have been following along with us and tuning in. So once again, guys, thank you for that. We really do appreciate y'all listening to the podcast. Shout out to Lone Star Wetlands, because those guys have now taken over as the #1 podcast episode. So that's pretty cool. Apparently we had an untapped duck hunting segment of our audience that we really didn't know about. So maybe we need to have I know we planned on having the December episode with them when we go hunting with them, but possibly we need to talk about maybe early teal season. Ask them if they can give us a duck forecast or something. So yeah, man, shout out to those guys, and thank y'all for listening to that podcast. Last week's podcast is going good also with Willie Waldrip. I'm sure he's in the thick of it now after syllabus week up there at Texas Tech. So hopefully he's doing good, getting settled in. I saw him killing some pigs. He posted the other day on Instagram. So it looks like he's having a good time up there. But if y'all haven't checked that podcast out, go back and listen to them. He's a cool guy, man. And he's got to have some awesome hunting opportunities and capitalized on dang near every one of them. So it was good talking to him. And, we got, like I said, we've got 23 other podcasts that we put out. So if this is y'all's first one, go back and check those out and hit that follow button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, leave us a review. Actually, so that's the thing for podcasts now, reviews. So if you like the podcast, throw up 5 stars. If you don't like the podcast, you don't have to listen to it. I don't know what else to tell you about that, but if you do, please leave a review, hit that like button on YouTube if you watch it on there, and then give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcast. And like I said, help us out, man. It really helps. That'll get our podcast out to other people, other listeners. And we like to do it the old-fashioned way too. If you enjoy the podcast, send it to a friend. You can go up to the top right of the podcast, hit them little buttons right there. It'll say share link, and then just text it to your best hunting buddy or fishing buddy or anybody that you like. So appreciate y'all listening to the podcast. We're going to hop into this one with Zach, learn a little bit about him and growing some whitetails. So appreciate y'all listening, guys, and we'll catch y'all next week. What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Tejas Hunt Club Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon McDowell, and this week I'm going to be sitting down with Zack Vucurevich of Whetstone Habitat. And Zach and I met at the POMA conference a couple years ago, and we just hit it off and got to talk about hunting and fishing and all that kind of stuff. And we talked again this year at the POMA conference, and he was kind of letting me know some things he had in the works and stuff for his brand and what he does and what he can offer different people. So we planned on doing this podcast a bit sooner, but now I'm glad we kind of like waited a little bit because we have some pretty exciting news. He actually has a newsletter, which we're going to kind of talk about today on the podcast. So it's going to be a lot of information. But I feel like he's going to be a great guy to talk to. And for all our listeners, he's going to be a great guy for y'all to follow as well. So, Zach, please give us a little introduction about yourself. Kind of tell us where you grew up and everything, and then how you got started in the outdoors.
Thank you so much for having me, Brandon. So my name's Zack Vucurevich. I'm a wildlife biologist. Grew up kind of all over the country. I was born in Arizona. Went to high school in Pennsylvania. Got my college degree in wildlife and fisheries management from West Virginia University. So shout out Mountaineers. And then from that point on, I kind of bounced around the country, taking kind of the traditional wildlife biologist route. You know, you're kind of met with a couple options at that point in your career. You can either, go and get your master's or your PhD and kind of jump right into a full-time permanent position, or you can do the route that I did and kind of work a couple seasonal jobs and kind of bounce around the country and gain a little bit of experience as opposed to further in your education. So I went with that route and kind of bounced all over the country. And, at the end of the day, I had a bunch of really great experiences working for different, state and federal agencies, private organizations, nonprofits, and kind of settled down and decided that Whetstone Habitat was something I wanted to pursue. And so it was about 4 years ago now, I started, I'd always chosen jobs in the wildlife industry that kind of dealt with habitat, whether that was when I was working for the West Virginia DNR or when I was down in Texas, working on a ranch down there. It was always very heavy into the habitat management stuff because that always kind of tripped my trigger. So when I was looking at all these different opportunities that I had and all the supervisors that I had and all of those roles, we all got into that job, a wildlife biologist, to be outside getting our hands dirty out in the field. And all of my supervisors were sitting at the desk doing policy work. And don't get me wrong, it's important. I'm glad somebody's doing it. But the writing was kind of on the wall. I kind of wanted to go off and do my own thing. And I felt like I had enough experience under my belt at that point. All the business side of things and, marketing and all of that jazz has been new to me. Writing, it's all been so many new opportunities that I've had to, kind of juggle and figure out what works. But, it's been a great way. So Whetstone Habitat is my company. I do wildlife habitat consulting and restoration. So I'm working all across the country. It's a lot of people, a lot of deer hunters hired me to come in. They have maybe a recreational property or a farm that's been in the property for a number of years. And they want to improve it. They want better hunting opportunities. They want to see more deer or healthier deer or bigger deer, or maybe it's a turkey. The turkey populations are in decline.
Yeah.
Or, I had one lady in Ohio, she was really into songbirds and she didn't have a ton of acreage, but she wanted to know what she could do around her house for songbirds because she was a bird watcher. There's really no limit as to what I can help these people with. And it's really fulfilling. I get to go out, I get to work hand in hand with these landowners. And just seeing that quick turnaround, that response Mother Nature has when you do these controlled disturbances on the landscape, it really gets my blood pumping. It gets me excited. And the fact that I get to work with people every day that are so passionate about the outdoors just makes it that much better. So that's a little bit about me. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. Been here for a little over a year now. So, organizations like POMA have been great for me as far as networking and meeting people like yourself where I can bounce ideas and stuff off of. So it's been a really awesome industry. This hunting and outdoor industry is full of wonderful people. And I've been feeling so blessed to even have an opportunity to, kind of chase my dreams.
Dude, that's so cool. And like, I'm glad, like I said, getting on the, after meeting you at Poma the first time in Nashville, that was the first year Meagan and I went, and we joined the organization. But even like, I like the way that we're doing this podcast now, and the listeners can hear in your voice, like how much you enjoy it. And it's the same thing. Like when I first met you, I was like, this guy really likes what he does, man. And he really gets into it. And I really admired that a lot, for sure. Cause like, the photography and videography stuff is something that like I've come into, but like I didn't start out doing that or growing up wanting to be a photographer or anything like that. So it's something I've grown into. And like, as like you said, being in the industry, you get to meet people like guides and outfitters and, other people in the industry that have known what they wanted to do for a long time. So at what age did you like find this passion for the outdoors and like wanting it to be like a wildlife biologist? Because I mean, here in Texas, you have a lot of people that want to do like animal science and stuff. We grow up in an ag background, so I mean, it's cattle, horses, and then the wildlife side kind of goes hand in hand. So we have a lot of 4-H and FFA like opportunities to learn that. But like you said, moving around and stuff, like how did that come into your life? And like you said, figure out that that's what you wanted to do.
I always love this question because when I was a little kid, Sunday mornings we'd come downstairs and most kids were watching cartoons and stuff. My parents would see me and I was watching, Jeff Corwin, and I was watching Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter, and like that was those BBC documentaries. Like that was always what I wanted to do. And I was just like obsessed with it since I was a little kid. My dad, growing up in Arizona, it's too hot to really do anything. I remember we were into mountain biking as kids, but it's too hot to go during the day. So like it was before LEDs. So we had these big like halogen lights you would mount to the handlebars and we'd go mountain biking, or, all the cactuses everywhere. And like, they'd be burning up, like smoking. They were so hot, but like you had to do what you could do to get outside and get exposed. The only reason we were out there at night is to get out of the sun. So my dad was really good about taking us on fishing trips. We'd go up into the White Mountains in northern Arizona. We'd go camping all the time. So I was always engaged with the outdoors and kind of knew what I wanted to do. But short of being a TV host, I didn't know what that meant. Like most people, I meet people my own age that they look around, they might even be hunters, and they just think that wildlife falls from the sky. It's just there. Like so many people take it for granted, and you probably don't run into that like nearly as much in Texas because there is so much private ground over there, and people are so adamant about land management. But up around where I grew up in like central Pennsylvania, it's like people are hitting deer with their car all the time, and it's like they're just like they're a nuisance for people. So really kind of understanding what I wanted to do wasn't always clear. Like I wanted to work with wildlife. I wanted to do something outside. When I started college, I didn't get into wildlife management until later on in my college career. I kind of bounced around different options and found out. I remember I had one really good high school teacher that was, it was like a Bio 2 class, and he was really into salamanders. So he was like a college professor back in the day. His retirement was teaching a couple high school courses, but he was really good. Shout out Randy Castle. He was the one that put it in my head that like you can make a career out of this. Like every state has a state agency. There's all these federal agencies out there. So he kind of planted that seed. I would credit him my junior year high school. But then even when I got into wildlife management, like I knew of biologists, but like most people, it's like game warden is the only real wildlife biologist people think of. So there really are there's a ton of opportunities out there, and it's, you look around and there's around every corner, we're encroaching on more and more wildlife habitat all the time. There's people out there that have to deal with these wildlife conflicts, and there's more jobs popping up than I could ever imagine. And I've only been in the industry. I graduated in 2015. So in 8 years, I've seen, like, it seems like a lot of doors are opening. So anyone passionate about wildlife and interested in getting into it, a lot of biologists are aging out. It's one of those career where a lot of people are getting into retirement age, and there are some doors opening and some opportunities out there. So I would encourage that to any of your listeners.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, like you said, it's a lot of people in our industry are aging out, and we're waiting for the next group of people to be like going and filling in those positions, and sometimes some of those people might not be too friendly to people that hunt and fish. So that's another problem we're seeing in some of those state and like
that's
federal
been a shocker
agencies
to
and
me over the
stuff.
last, I'd say, since I graduated, just the complete transformation of some of those agencies, with more of a preservationist, mindset. It's unbelievable to watch. I talked about, like, what a good friend of mine is the silviculturist for the Forest Service, and talking to him the other day about the mismanagement of our national forest that he's in charge of. And he's like, my hands are tied. It's upper management telling me what I can do as a forest manager. And, it's like, it's a mess, man. So that's where I look at, like, God blessed me with the ability to write. I'm looking to tap into being able to be more vocal about some of these things that I'm seeing going on and raising awareness about it, because that's where we are as communicators. Like, it's up to us to bring this to people's attention.
Exactly. That's why, like, we do the photography, videography, and then started the podcast too, is to talk about these things. Cause like, it's not they're getting swept under the rug. It's just not in plain view for people to see. And people are busy with their lives. Like, people with kids and people that are voting and that are of that age, like, everybody has their life to do. And if they're not seeing this information, like, right in front of them, there's not really a trail that they're going to follow to go look it up. Cause, like I said,
half
busy,
the time
so,
the trail gets buried on
fact,
social media anyways. So
the trail that's being left is not the trail to the right answer, So you are right about us being able to communicate and, like, tell those stories and things. Cause and I get it too. Like, most of the people that, do believe in hunting and fishing want to be hunting and fishing, not necessarily. And that's a sacrifice that a lot of those wildlife biologists for those state agencies make. Like, you're most of the time they're working during hunting season, so they don't get to hunt much, but they're outside. So I could definitely see how, that's not like an option that the hunters really want to take, but it's being educated and being able to communicate. And then when it counts, voting on things and being vocal and voicing your opinion when it's time to. But yeah, man, that's cool. Like, so working in that industry, and like you said, your transition of going to the federal side and kind of bouncing around, like, what was your first job that you had out of college?
First job out of college was actually down in Texas. So I was on spring break my senior year of college in Hawaii, and I had a phone interview. And I remember I was loving the time difference, because March Madness started that week. And so it was like 6 a.m. the games were tipping off in Hawaii, because it was noon Eastern time. And so, like, I was on Eastern time, so I get up, go for a run, and then I'd, like, tune in, and I was watching these basketball games. So while I was out there, I had scheduled an interview for a potential job after I graduate. And so I took this position. It was a ranch hand up until hunting season, on a property in Bandera, Texas, so outside of San Antonio in hill country. And that first part of the job, the ranch hand aspect of it, I loved it. I said I always liked habitat stuff. Even at the time, like part of the deal was we had a lot of cedar encroachment and juniper encroachment. So we'd be out there and we would take turns on the skid steer, one day after every other day, day on, day off, day on, day off, sitting in the darn skid steer, cutting, piling up all these cedars and junipers. But it was so important. Like, you go to some of these areas around the ranch that they had done that in years past, and it was completely different. The place was transformed. It was a result of mismanagement. It was, whether it was not having fire on the landscape or keeping cattle off the landscape for too long, where you had these woody encroachment where you didn't want it. It completely changed what the area looked like. So by getting in there and doing some of that work, like I said, Mother Nature's all about doing these controlled disturbances and making it, kind of transform, trying to replicate some of the stuff that's happened in the past. So we couldn't go through. There was too many, cedars around to burn at the time. It was too much of a fuel load. So you had to cut them and stack them and pile them up. So where normally a forest fire would take care of that problem, we were beyond that point. We couldn't do it safely, so we'd get out there and cut it. So all sorts of fun habitat stuff out there. I remember another thing that my ranch manager pounded into my head was the importance of stress on these animals. You know, if you're trying to grow the biggest, most mature animal around, now our fence, it was a high fence ranch, but it wasn't a pin deer operation. So all our deer were naturally, breeding around the ranch. We had a couple different pastures, but thousands of acres for each pasture in most circumstances. So very well managed herd. Our doe management was very rigorous. I killed more deer that year than I'll probably kill the rest of my life, and it was all part of work. It was part of my job. I'd get up in the morning and evening. I was going out and I was meeting the doe quota. So lots of fun things, but again, it just kept getting drilled into my head how important minimizing stress was. Like, what does herd management have to do with stress? It's these people like to think of Bambi, where it's like mom and dad and baby, and they're out in these family groups, and that's short of the doe family groups with the white-tailed deer. You don't have a lot in bachelor groups during the summertime. Like, they aren't as social a creatures as we make them out to be. So if you have too high numbers around, that stresses them out. All of a sudden they're fighting for resources, they're fighting for space, they're transmitting diseases earlier. So like all of these little things that I was kind of picking up along the way. My manager out there, I was working at Flying A Ranch, was the name of the ranch. Keith Lake is the name of the manager. Brilliant guy. I learned so much from him, and it was just his willingness to let me kind of pick his brains and kind of wheel around the property with him, because it was all fascinating. Like, we talk about QDMA and quality deer management and the National Deer Association and kind of what those guys stand for. I was living that. How many protein pellets can we get down these deer throat, in the course of a growing season? Like, so my first job, and then the hunting aspect, I got to see the customer service side of things, and like being exposed in Texas to, you were talking about earlier with how much with the 4-H and hunting and how much the community that is. And Texas is a really interesting place in how wildlife is managed oftentimes. A lot of those ranches and stuff, it's kind of managed like livestock in some instances, and how they're shipping animals around and stuff like that. So it was really interesting. It was all new to me, kind of good exposure, and like being able to understand, the nitty gritty of like genetics, how important are genetics. I was able to learn more on a high fence operation than I could ever learn, managing all low fence operations around, because we could control variables. Like, there's so much that goes into that style of hunting and land management down there that I don't want to say people discredit when you start talking about high fences, but a lot of people do,
They do. And like I said, I've worked with a lot of deer breeders, even on that side, just from a marketing standpoint for photos and videos and stuff. And I feel like a lot of it's got a bad rap. I think just because you're going to have individuals that like, for instance, if I think you go shoot a high fence deer, like I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm not going to go do that because I don't want to experience that hunt. But I also understand that for a guy that lives in downtown Houston or downtown Dallas or San Antonio, that's a lawyer or a doctor or something like that, that doesn't have the time to go do that. That's hunting to them. It's a different experience for them than it is for me. He's still buying a hunting license. He's still buying camo. He's still buying a rifle or a bow and archery equipment or ammo, bullets, all the stuff that contributes to Pittman Robertson, which goes back to conservation. I can't knock that person. Now, if you're going to do that and then you want to brag that you're the biggest, baddest hunter in the world, well, then that's kind of a different story we're not going to agree on. But the point of it is what you did is not wrong. It's in the bounds of what is legal in Texas. It benefits the wildlife. I'm all for it, and I'm not going to knock anybody for it. Like you said, I've even hunted, like you said, on ranches that are thousands of acres on a high fence. If you think that hunting thousands of acres under a high fence is easy, I invite you to Texas. Right. I got a lot of friends that guide. I can point you in the right direction of going on a high fence hunt on some big pieces of property. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. It's not just a put and shoot or whatever you think.
Well, I think you encapsulated a lot of the issues and problems I see surrounding hunting in general in that short, monologue. It's we're looking around and we're choosing these differences and we're nitpicking and we're putting people, trying to get rid of it's everybody's right. Like as long as everybody's following the rules, I have zero qualms about it. I might not agree morally, but I'm not, or ethically, or like as long as they're following the law and they have good intentions, I'm all for everybody getting out there and having a heart, having a hunt, whatever that looks like for them.
Yeah.
And the more and more we scratch and claw at each other over the nuts and bolts of how we're doing it, whether it's crossbows, being legalized for archery season or whatever the heck we're going to argue about. It's distasteful and it's getting so far away. It's just adding fuel to what the non-hunters want to see. It's like next thing you know, let's say like I was with the crossbow situation, let's say it's going up for vote in some legislation or at a state level. Non-hunters find out about that. They might have an opportunity to ban a hunting implement. That's a win for them. So if they can get some other hunters, like some hunters on their side for the case, like I keep seeing it happen over and over and over again, where people would rather, side with the wrong crowd to win a pissing match than, stick to what's right. So I think we can all be adults about everything and like sit down with a lot of these issues and just let people enjoy the outdoors with however that looks like to them, as long as they're not endangering other people, as long as they're following the rules. Like there's so many opportunities out there for people to get out and enjoy the space. So it's great. I see a lot of good things in the industry and a lot of good positive trends, but that's one that just keeps happening over and over and over again, where we're just like we're so distasteful when it comes to something we may not agree with, that yet it being legal. Like you don't have to vocalize your opinions, you don't have to, it's we're all on the same team at the end of the day. Like we have a much larger battle we should be worried
about. Yes sir, 100% agreed, because I mean it gets ridiculous sometimes, and like you see stuff and like I don't run into it that much with me, but I see it on other people's pages and stuff, and I'm like, why? And then half the time I'm also thinking like maybe these are just bots, like people just make up this stuff just to make people mad. Like that's what I think it is half the time, because I have podcasts and I'm talking to people, and for the most part, most of the people that I see in the industry have this same mentality or thought about this as we do, right, as we do right now, and it still like shows up. So obviously it's a mix of stuff that is true and people that are nitpicking, and it's like, guys, we
mechanical versus fixed braid broadheads, whatever it is. Should you take a frontal shot? Like it's all these things where it's like it all comes down to personal choice, and let's just respect each other,
Yeah. Now, if my name's Levi Morgan, I can take a frontal shot, like he's warranted. But like me, no, I don't have that right now. Yeah. But maybe one day, if I keep practicing and shooting enough and I get confidence with it. But everybody judges on what they can do. Yeah.
And half the time it's jealousy. I see it all the time. Like I might have an opportunity to hunt somewhere that's private ground. Oh, private, blah blah blah. You're not busting your ass. It's like, what?
Yeah.
I think you're jealous.
Yeah, no, we never. And I've noticed that, like going to other states, but like as you know, in Texas, we don't really have that that debate too much. But, dude, I went to the Texas Wildlife Association convention this past summer, and they had the Texas Big Game Awards, and there were a couple guys that got awards that killed some giant deer on public land in Texas. So it's still possible, but few and far between.
Where were they? Did they disclose what part of Texas? West Texas somewhere?
Yeah, and most of it's in the national forest. Like honestly, Sam Houston National Forest, and then what was the other one? I think one guy killed one out in like somewhere in the hill country. I can't remember what, like WMA or whatever it was, but they said it. I mean, it's known. You can go bow hunt in the national forest, but you have to go off
you gotta
in
work
there.
for it. That's okay. The deer don't weigh. They don't
Yeah.
weigh as much when you gotta pack them out as they do up north.
No,
Pack
no,
out isn't
not at all.
nearly
Not
half
at
as
all.
bad.
That's funny. So how long did you spend in, like, how much
Down
time did
there
you spend in Texas?
A little over 10 months, not quite 11 months. So
Okay, cool. So like almost a full year. So you got to see kind of almost year round of what Texas has to offer and stuff. And so, did you just leave because you had a different opportunity, or was that just a time for that?
yeah,
for
it
that
was
job?
it was more, that was kind of like I saw what my ceiling was for that time being on that ranch. Like I probably could have had some leeway if I wanted to stay down there in Texas and figure something out.
Yeah.
But at the time my brother was getting ready to get married and start a family up north. All my family was kind of around Ohio and the Midwest, so I was kind of itching to get back up. And
Yeah.
so I moved back up north and kind of went from there. I will say this about Texas: I was there for 10 months, and you guys, you have a way of, if you're not from Texas, it takes a while till people warm up to you. I feel like. I picked that up quick.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know if it's the way I talk or if there's something in my teeth everywhere I go.
That's funny, man. That's funny. I'd never realized that. You said you were like around Bandera area when you came down
I
here.
was in Bandera. Cowboy capital of the world.
That's
I've been to
different,
a
man.
couple other places. Cody, Wyoming comes to mind to argue. But
yeah. So I just moved. Like Bandera's not that well. It's a little ways from where I'm at now, but we just moved to the hill country, so we're kind of in a different area. I haven't had real time to go out and do stuff yet, but we'll see how friendly they are. Hopefully they're not too mean.
dove hunting the cisterns was my favorite thing to do. Like we didn't have many evenings off down there when I was working, but always, the assistant manager had a son who was, he must have been 4 years old at the time, and whenever we'd get an evening off, we'd say, "Hey Brady, you want to come play bird dog?" Because nobody had a bird dog, and we'd go all pile in the shadow next to the cistern and wait on those doves to come in and land at night, and send Brady out there to go pick them up for us. So it was fun. It was it was hard work. It was fun work. Like I said, I learned a ton. It was great. I wouldn't change anything about picking that job up out of college.
That's awesome, man. That's real cool. So when you moved back to Ohio, you said you were going back to go with family and stuff, and then did you go work for the state, or how'd you end up in Cody,
I didn't
Wyoming?
move to Cody, Wyoming. No, I didn't live there. I was making a joke about Bandera claiming to be the cowboy capital of the world. Cody
yeah.
Cody said the same thing. No, I moved back to Ohio, and I was actually working a silly job for a while. I was doing you ever been in like a Home Depot or a Lowe's or Walmart and seen like birds that get trapped in the store? They're like stuck inside. So they have to do something about those birds. Those stores have to hire somebody to come in and get rid of those. So I worked for a company that kind of specialized in that, live capturing those birds and getting them to the store. So I lived in Cincinnati, but I was kind of traveling all over the country doing that for a while. I went to Puerto Rico to catch birds. That was pretty cool.
Dude, it's always like the strangest, not that job's strange, but like it's different, and you get to always hear like people that have different jobs like that. They're like, "Oh yeah, I did this, but then it led me to get to go do this." So like, even though like you're probably like bored or like, "I gotta go catch these birds," you had the opportunity to go do it in Puerto Rico.
Like, it became personal. Like they were pretty smart. Whenever it was like a like depending on what species of bird you were going after, I could talk all day about catching birds. It would turn into like a chess match. Like people don't think about.
Oh, dude, that's hilarious.
But it's because we're trying to catch them. So the way we would catch them, it's like ornithologists, people who study birds, bird biologists, they use a mist net. And it's like, if you've ever seen like a gill net, like people use for salmon and stuff, where they'll swim into it and get stuck. Yeah. It's like that, but kind of scaled down. Think of like monofilament fishing string. This really fine net with big webbing. Birds will fly into it. So like an ornithologist would use it. they'll play some bird calls or put it in an area that has a lot of bird traffic, and these birds fly into it and get tangled up, and then you pull them out. It doesn't hurt them. You can put a bird band on their leg or a GPS tracking transmitter or whatever you're doing. In our case, we're getting them the heck out of, a Walmart or whatever. So we would hoist these nets way up in the rafters. Then you'd have to flush the birds and try to get them to flush into those nets. So you're like, okay. And it's like hunting, you're like, where's the food? They're going like the bird seeds, like in a Sam's Club, it was always where like the bird food or the pet food, because the bags would rip open. There's always pet food on the ground. So it's like, okay, that's where they're getting food. Yeah. Where are they getting water? The coolers. Above all the coolers in Costco, there's all those piping and it's always dripping. That's where they're getting water. So like you're trying to figure it out, these pieces to the puzzle. Where do they like to go? I remember there's certain times you'd have to like change your shirt because they would recognize you, or like wear sunglasses because they'd see you coming and they'd take off the other direction. It's crazy. It was a fun job, like there's still people doing it. Like
that's really
the company's still around. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I never really thought about that. Like, I mean, I guess I don't know if we have that in Texas. If we do, I hope we do. But I worked at Stamp.
It's a health. It's a health concern. If they're defecating on the products, and also nobody's going to buy a product with a bunch of bird crap on it. So
true. I worked at Sam's Club in College Station for a while, and I mean, we had birds in there. We had bats too one time, and like I don't know who they called, but like I never saw anybody running around with nets trying to catch them or anything. So that's why I was like, man, I wonder what they did, or like, did they just sneak in there and do it at night?
Yeah, so that's kind of where this company kind of took off. I'm trying to tell their origin story. So they used to have to shut the stores down because one thing about birds is they're not nocturnal. They only fly around during the day. So if you get in there, they'd have to shut the store down so they could get in there with air rifles and shoot the birds out of the rafters, So whenever a company came up with this way to like get them out of the store where they could stay open and not lose out all on this profit, like I don't know how much they were charging the company I worked for me to go in there and do it, but I think it was quite lucrative at the time. It was, I'd get a couple $100 for going out there, and like sometimes I'd be in and out in a couple hours. Other times I might spend 2 or 3 days going back to the same stupid store because one bird is there and I can't, like, I'm getting outsmarted by a bird with a brain the size of a pea. Like it's very humiliating. Wildlife can humiliate you, as any hunter knows. Any turkey hunter can tell you that.
Oh yeah. They can make you feel like you're not even human. Like, how do I even have opposable thumbs right now? Like, I should be just like beating my chest.
Why did I think that was a good idea? Like, how could I possibly have thought that would have worked?
Yeah.
Like, that bird is 10 steps ahead of me.
Like you're
yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. And like it's crazy. Like we were turkey hunting one time, and I think I've told this story before, but we had this turkey come in and we saw him running in for a long ways away, and my buddy Jared called him in, and I was just thinking about how beautiful the footage was that Megan was going to get with the camera. And I just forgot all about like getting ready and getting my gun up and stuff. And he got about like maybe 15 yards from me, and my gun was still in between my legs and I couldn't pick it up. And I just tried to pick it up real quick, and like he saw me, like I double moved, like I didn't make it real smooth when I went to go grab the gun, and I raised up and I shot 3 times, and I had to watch him run all the way back down the same trail.
I hope it wasn't the last day of the season.
It's just like, oh, yeah. But birds may have small brains, but somehow
that sounds
they're pretty
about like
smart.
how my spring season ended this year. I was thinking about.
Oh man, where did you hunt
Kentucky.
out? Would you hunt out in Tennessee?
So I didn't hunt Tennessee this year.
Cool.
My family's farm is in Kentucky. It's about 2 hours east of Nashville. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I love it.
Pretty cool.
So what? It's awesome.
Yeah. So like, is that where your hunting spot that you have?
So we got about 300 acres. It's like I said, it's about 2 hours away from where I'm at. We've had the property for about 6 years now, and just seeing the transformation when we took over, the deer herd was like not good. Like people, Kentucky has some big deer getting shot every year. Like don't get me wrong, they like every year they're one of the top 5 states and big bucks getting killed. But that's mostly the northern part of the state. You know, you follow kind of that northwestern boundary, and where the Ohio River Valley is where most of those big, huge, giant deer are getting shot in Kentucky. You know, people don't think we're the hill country. We're like almost Appalachia. You know, Cumberland County, Kentucky. Like we're Daniel Boone country, and so it's not really known for growing big deer. And like seeing what the property went from, where we had a couple, you know, maybe 3-year-olds, 110, 120 inch 3-year-olds running around, and like, you know, last year. I harvested, it was a 147. The year before that, between my dad, my neighbor, and I, we had 2 deer over 160 harvested, and then I shot one that was 140 something. You know, like it's turning into a very productive area. And it's been an awesome, you know, proving grounds for me. You know, I'm not going to recommend. I'm not going to recommend anything to my clients that I haven't first done myself. Like that's one thing I joke about, where it's like I've made all the mistakes so you don't have to. Like they're expensive mistakes to make, and like no, I'm not going to guarantee anybody that their food plots are going to be successful. You know, I can't predict the weather. I can't, you know, handle how those seeds were treated between when you plant them and when, you know, they were harvested. You know, there's so many variables, but I can set people up for success, and I've made a lot of those mistakes, and I think a couple steps ahead of where most people are. Most people are always worried when they're looking at their property. They'll hear a podcast or they'll see a YouTube video. They're so glued in on like getting one, you know, whether it's a technique or, you know, whatever they're trying to accomplish. They get so narrowed in on like getting that thing done that they don't think of the implications or how it plays into the other stuff they're doing on the property. And a lot of people, like I'll take hinge cutting, for example. Hinge cutting was like everywhere. Everyone was talking about it probably 4 or 5 years ago now. And now I'm going on properties and I'm seeing blocks of woods that is like nothing but hinge cut. And I want to pull my hair out. It's too much. I'm like, what are you going to do? Get in here with the forestry mulcher? Like you're not going to be able to, I don't know what it is, but it's just inexperience. You know, you can chalk it up. Like that's all it is. I can't blame him I did the same sort of things. Like perfect example, when we first got the farm, I placed an order with the Kentucky Forestry Department for a bunch of seedlings. I ordered a bunch of persimmon. Deer love persimmon. You know, I got to plant a bunch of persimmon trees. So I ordered like 100 of them, you know? And so I go out there, and the first year we have the farm, I plant like 5 persimmon here and 5 over here and 5 over there, 5 over there. So I got 20 spots on the farm with 5 persimmon trees sitting in it. You know, fast forward 5 years, and we're finally starting to get some fruits being produced on those persimmon trees. And it's like, where the heck do I hunt? There's 20 different places on the farm those deer could be eating those persimmon. You know, they were all purchased the same year. They probably all have the same parent tree. Like they're gonna bloom the same time.
Yeah.
Like, I just shot myself in the foot
at the same
but like
time.
Those are the types of mistakes that people don't learn. I'm sure I'm not the first person to do that. You know, like but so there's a certain amount of like intricacy that goes into these management plans. And when I'm working for people, I'm writing these management plans, I take so much pride in setting them up for that success and putting them in a position where not only do they have a roadmap to get that property the way I'd like to see it, but I give them the tools where they can start making some of these management decisions on their own. You know, I want to give them enough confidence in their capabilities that they can extrapolate what I teach them or what I have in that piece of paper across the property. So got a little off track of talking about my family farm, but that family farm is really crucial to me as far as learning how.
Like you said, that's
a lot of my like my native prairie infatuation. Like I have the soft spot for grassland, so like a lot of as often as it makes sense, I'm trying to incorporate these grassland habitats into early successional type habitats into these management plans. And you know, the white-tailed deer it's such a fun critter to manage for. Like, I don't think people I'm like a kid in a candy store everywhere I go when people hire me to manage for whitetail. And like,
Yeah.
when you talk about, when people are describing the whitetail as a species, a term that gets thrown around all the time is edge. I have it in my slogan for my company, Whetstone Habitat. Give your property the edge. What is an edge species? When somebody says an edge species, they're talking about a creature that gravitates to where two different habitat types butt up against each other, come together, they form that edge. So
Yep.
the white-tailed deer is such an edge species that when I'm managing for them, a lot of what I'm doing is trying to cram as many different habitat types as I can into one property. I'm doing it in a manner that makes it huntable and beneficial for, but think about all the other wildlife that, I take a woodlot that used to be single age, it might be an old growth, everything in there is 100 years old. I might go in there and have 2 or 3 different treatments for that woodlot to diversify it into a couple different age structures, where I might have some young forest habitat, might have a savanna type habitat incorporated in there. And making something out of nothing is, I'm trying to create as many of those edges as I can and really condense them down. But when you look at the biomass and the amount of diversity that you're attracting to these locations, because all of a sudden you have that old growth structure still there for the flying squirrels. You have that kind of middle ground in a savanna that'd be beneficial, roosting grounds for a turkey. You have that. All of a sudden we're introducing young forest type habitat that's great for, escape cover for a bobwhite quail, or if you have grouse around, they love that young forest habitat, or, winter browse for you white-tailed deer. There's all these different species that start benefiting from the landscape when I get my hands on a property and start massaging it into a good whitetail property. It's like I get to play and make homes for so many different critters that otherwise people wouldn't give them the time of day, and it all kind of falls under that umbrella of deer management. And so I feel like I was saying, a kid in a candy store. It's just really awesome to get out there and to be able to manipulate the landscape in a way that's going to be, so impactful. And even if the landowner is unaware to all those other benefits, the fact that they're getting out there and doing it, like, that's where it blows a lot of people's minds. Where, like, they're doing all this work to shoot bigger deer. And it's like, why do you care what the reasoning is? Look at the end product. Look at what's being produced because of their desire to have bigger deer on the property. I couldn't care less, what their reasoning is. It's great habitat on the landscape for animals that are a public resource. Like, that's what people lose sight of. Yes, it's on private ground, but they're still managing for the public resource, whether that's, little Tweety birds using the scrub brush, or whether that's white-tailed deer that your neighbor inevitably shoots. We're managing for the public good. So
yeah, exactly. And I think there's been, especially outside of Texas, I mean, you go to the Midwest, you go to Iowa, states like that, and you have people that have private ground, and they're managing it like this. And I feel like that's been one of the things, like we talked about earlier, is like people that talk about, oh, well, I only hunt public, and the guy that's lucky enough to have private ground. Lucky enough to have private ground means that either you're working your butt off to pay someone like yourself to help you manage that property, or you're working your butt off to then pay to have time off so you can manage your property like that. So just because he was, someone paid for a piece of property, that there's a lot of work still tied to it. Like, they're not just because they bought it doesn't mean they're gonna
think
shoot
of how many
big
man
deer.
hours are tied into managing a large piece of property. and then think of how many man hours are involved with, like, staring at an Onyx map. And like, I'm not saying there aren't badass hunters out there going back and doing the public lands thing. I'm getting ready to go out to Montana and do a public lands hunt. Like, it's one of those, like, I'm glad we have opportunities in all places, but to poo someone for hunting on private land, or for owning private land, like, it's so nearsighted. Like, I just got done explaining how passionate I am and my clients are for having an impact on the landscape, and an impact that's going to benefit things outside. Nothing's glued to that perimeter fence. Anything can walk.
Yeah.
In most instances, there isn't even a perimeter fence. It's just like the wildlife
Yeah.
knows no property line. So the fact that I'm being able to manipulate states from Minnesota to New York all the way down into Missouri, like it's awesome. I think of the amount of acreage I've had to impact.
Yeah, that's cool.
It gets me excited.
Do you have that?
No, I
number by
keep meaning
chance?
to
Do you
sit
have that
down and
written
go
down somewhere?
through and add it up. I should. I
dude,
should keep a
you
total on
gotta
my
at
website.
least-
It would be a fun idea.
Yeah, you should keep a total, or at least like do a map or something and mark all the places that you've like worked on. That would be real cool to see, and like especially like going with your company going forward, just like the amount of ground you're going to cover.
I would like to figure out a way to turn my clients and former clients into some form of whether like a community. I don't know if that would be like an interactive map where people could reach out to other clients or people interested.
Yeah.
I don't know what that would look like, but I feel very fortunate every time I show up on a property or a site visit. I'm showing up having some understanding of what the individual, the landowner is like, having had conversations, email exchanges with them, and I'm still blown away by how wonderful everyone is. We're all there for the same purpose. We're all very conservation focused. All different walks of life. I got one client whose family owns a dairy farm. I got another one who's a truck driver. I got about 100 CPAs. I got brain surgeon, professional athlete. Like there's like people from all walks of life, but they're all contacting me because how passionate I am for having quality habitat on the landscape, and so having that connection going into it, and then we show up and there are people I'd want to go out and have dinner with. Send Christmas cards to. They're great. They're wonderful people. Our lifestyles align very similar to, so our political leanings are usually similar. Like it's a lot of, I feel very fortunate that I don't feel like I have to pander to my clients. They're very similar to me in a lot of
that's
ways.
awesome.
I've made a lot of wonderful friendships, whether that's through my work with consulting or through my writing and my relationship with organizations like POMA. It's been extraordinary, the people I've met in this space.
That's so cool, man. Like, so walk me through, like, if somebody were to contact you and say, hey, I don't know if you have like a limit on like acreage that you work on, like as a minimum or something, but like, say I have a piece of property and I want you to help me with it. Like how does that process work?
So there's most of the time, like if somebody wants to contact me, I encourage them all to go onto my website and there's a contact me form. So it's whetstonehabitat.com, WHETSTONE. Whetstonehabitat.com. There's a form there. Contact us, or I forget exactly the verbiage on there. But I'd set up a phone call and kind of pick their brains, figure out what's their intent. That's the most important thing, is figuring out what do they want to do with the place, kind of what's their vision, what kind of means do they have at their disposal, like what type of equipment do they have, what have they been doing in the past, how long have they owned this farm, what type of trail camera pictures are they working with. These initial conversations have been as short and sweet as 10 minutes, and they've been as long as 3 hours, just sitting down talking to this person about their farm. I love it. It's great.
Yeah.
But once that's, if we decide it's a good fit and they want to use me going forward, it'd be a matter of, coordinating a date on the calendar. That'd be good for me to get out there and walk the property. And I always prefer that the property owner be there with me when I'm doing these consultations. By no means do they have to be there with me. I've had plenty where I've been out there on my own, or maybe a farm manager is there on site. But I like to get a good idea. I do virtual evaluations where we can hop on a Zoom call and look at the aerial photographs and kind of go through that way. But the quality, it's just, you can learn a lot from those aerials, but nothing beats being there, boots on the ground, kind of seeing the habitat, figuring out, like, I haven't gotten into my I have a hatred for invasive plants. Like Johnson grass is the one that just makes my blood boil if you're curious. But and Cerci lesbies, there's a couple that I can't stand. But
yeah, like I love it. Like love it when we're like, I was like, working or out walking properties and stuff, and like, yeah, back in the day, we used to have bobwhite quail here. We just don't know what happened to them. I'm like, well, see all this non-native grass here?
And there's where'd your hedgerows go? You got no more hedgerows anymore.
Yeah. Like how do you think they're gonna survive?
It's amazing. Like if you build it, they will come, right? So it's a great opportunity to me. Like I'm getting out there and I'm meeting with these landowners, and like once I'm on site and I have an idea of what their goals are, then I really like to pride myself in kind of working as a liaison. So like there's funding opportunities out there for a lot of these property owners, and many people are unaware of it. And like I never go out there and like guarantee people I can find them money. Like it's not my money to give, but people don't realize that the federal government, like USDA, wants to reward landowners for doing good conservation practices on their property. So if you look at the management plans that I'm writing, and like I'm handing them over to a property owner, and you look at the stuff that I'm prioritizing for that property owner to achieve. So it's probably something along the lines of get rid of all the invasive species. Oh, they have cost share programs to help fund that. Well, okay, what about native grasses and prairie restoration or pollinator habitat? There's a ton of funding available for that. Even food plots, if you're doing pollinator habitat and you want to plant a perennial clover, fire break around the perimeter of that, it's not technically a food plot, it's a fire break, but there's a lot of these funding opportunities out there, and I can write these management plans in a manner that I really try to speak to the agencies that are going to be looking at it, where I might get away from calling something a bedding thicket, where if I'm just having a conversation with somebody, I would call, a little clear cut a bedding thicket that we're trying to make thicker for deer to get used to bedding in. Well, in my management plans, I'd call it a temporary forest opening, because, a lot of that funding available for that habitat technique is for songbird habitat. So those songbirds, they like those little patch cuts. So they like seeing language that coincides with what they're going to be, delivering those funds for. So like I said, I can at least point them in the right direction towards like the NRCS office or Pheasants Forever or Quails Forever, whoever's around. It's kind of up to the landowner at that point. I can't enroll their farm for them or anything like that, but I'm more than happy to, share my management plan with their farm bill biologists. I like meeting as many of those people as I can. They have a super important job. They're the ones distributing all that money to my clients. So like, I like knowing those guys. They're great. So reach out to your NRCS offices. A lot of times, state agencies. I would love for every single one of your listeners to hire me, but there's state agencies out there that have resources, whether it's a forester coming out to look at your property, stuff like that. There's a lot of resources for landowners. And like I said, I encourage everyone, if you're interested, please do contact me. As you can tell, I love talking about this stuff. I'm very passionate about having an impact out there. And I feel like it's reciprocated everywhere I go. We got a lot of passionate people out there wanting to do the right thing. So I feel very fortunate. I feel like there's no shortage of people trying to do the right thing.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest things is like people don't understand how much funds there are there, and like how much help you can get just by building your fence a certain way and making sure the height of it is this and the stakes are put in this way. Like there's so much opportunity out there. I mean, but it takes a little bit of looking, but you can find it. And I was sitting here, I mentioned it before, we're sitting here with Meagan a couple weeks ago. We were watching Lee Lukowski, and he was talking about how he was enrolling in programs with the government on his properties and things, and how he was getting
Yep.
tax breaks and different things and stuff. So, and buying properties that way and getting funding to purchase stuff, like it's all out there, and you just got to do a little digging for it.
And like I said, I know enough to be dangerous. I can get people pointed in the right direction. First and foremost, I said, just an introductory phone call is a great way. I like having those opportunities to connect with people, and even if it didn't work out, if I don't think I can help people, I would point them in the best direction I know possible. Like I said, at the end of the day, it's all about getting the best habitat on the landscape and making an impact. So however we get that done, it makes me happy.
Exactly. And, like you said, we're going to talk about here, great time for the people that maybe aren't able to hire you full time, or part time, or how that works for your schedule. You're coming out with Whetstone Weekly, which I'm going to stop right. How did you come up with the name Whetstone Habitat?
So the farm that my family got in Kentucky, there's a creek running through the middle of it, Whetstone Creek. So, there's two. One big Whetstone Creek bisects the property, and little Whetstone Creek kind of flanks one side. So I did Whetstone Habitat after Whetstone Creek right there, and
dude, I love it. I love it. I was hoping that was the case. Like, I always, with people that start their own companies, I wonder how they come up with their name and stuff. So like, I was hoping that it had like a sentimental value, and that's exactly what it was.
The creek
that's
itself
real cool.
has this big slate bottom, and they would cut the millstones, those wet stones, those wet milling stones is what it was talking about. So my neighbor out there actually has one of the old stones that they cut from Whetstone Creek at his place out there. So
that's really cool.
Yep.
Dude, that's awesome. So so tell me about the newsletter.
Yeah, so we just launched Whetstone Weekly. It's going to be a weekly newsletter. I got Whetstone Weekly and Whetstone Almost Weekly if something important's happening or something I think is absolutely necessary. I'm not going to pester you guys, I promise, with emails or anything, but the best way to keep up with what I'm doing, I'm looking around, and I got the email about a month ago that National Deer Association's publication is gonna, after this next issue, Quality Whitetails is gonna go straight to digital. I love magazines. I love writing for magazines. I like touching them. I like having them in my hands. That's just one example. There's I don't know. Print it's a hard space right now, and I think the quickest way for me to get what I want to say, for me to get my techniques, my opinions, my philosophy is going to be through this newsletter directly to all the landowners out there that can have an impact. I can sit down and hammer this stuff out and talk to you all. So I really I want to turn this into, like I said, something community based, where we can start, whether that's hosting eventually. When I look at this, I want to start organizing habitat workshops at my farm, doing stuff like that, organizing events, and it's all going to be taking place through this newsletter. I'm going to continue writing for other publications. I'm a writer that I enjoy doing that part of my job, getting in front of new audiences, but this newsletter is just going to be a quick way for me to be able to, keep every up to date. What am I doing on my farm? What do I think you should be doing on your place this time of year? I'm getting ready tomorrow I'm working on one, here's 5 ways to end your deer season before it starts. Like 5 mistakes you don't want to make and into the deer season. Like it's just quick hitters, stuff like that. All my YouTube content when I'm doing podcast appearances, that kind of stuff, it's all going to be fed into there. It'd be a great way for people to contact me, communicate with me. I'd also like to use it when I'm doing these consultations. A lot of my travel costs it can get expensive, especially with airline fares and stuff right now. So when I'm going out of state, I'm going to be able to use that as a place to say, hey, I'm going to Pennsylvania in October. If you're interested in having me look at your property, we can reduce travel costs and use it as a way for people to, kind of save some money that way too. So I'm really excited about it. Like I said, I can talk all day long about habitat and deer management, and I can write about it all day long too. So it's super exciting, and I'm excited to keep churning them out.
Yeah, man. Like I said, I'll definitely be subscribing to the newsletter just to gain knowledge. And like I said, I love that the habitat stuff too. Like I think it's the most important part for any animal. Obviously, I mean you can do as much as you can, but unless you get that knowledge, like it's not going to work. Like you said, planting persimmon trees in 20 different places. So like you said, you're a wealth of knowledge for sure. And like, I appreciate you coming on the podcast and talking about the newsletter and everything. And as anything that we can do to help with you in this newsletter or help get your information out, like I said, I'm going to be listening to it. So I'll definitely pass it along to everybody and everything. So like I said, I've enjoyed following along since we met a couple years ago and seeing the different stuff you do, and I'm really excited for you to do this for your company and everything. I like seeing other people win. So
Awesome. I
it's real cool,
appreciate
man.
that, Brandon. Thank you so much. And yeah, like I'm working with a seed company, coming up with a couple, here's my favorite seeds that I like getting in the ground. I got a native grasses and wildflowers blend that I'm working on that I'm super excited about, trying to keep things, keep them affordable, but be able to have quality habitat on the landscape. So
Yeah,
there's a couple things in the works that are going to be really exciting opportunities for Whetstone Habitat. So like you were saying, like I was preaching, this newsletter is going to be a great place to kind of keep up with all that kind of stuff. So getting ready to do this Montana elk hunt. I've never had an elk tag. If you're curious how that's going to end, that's probably going to be the first place anyone's going to find out.
dude. Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't get a tag for anything out west this year, but I'm gonna do. I got to play some hunting here in Texas. And then I'm gonna do some guiding and stuff, hopefully. And then I'm trying to work on something for December. If I can get it, it's gonna be pretty cool. But if not, we'll keep working on it. But yeah, man, dude, that elk. I do want to hunt elk, but I'm more of a mule deer fan than elk.
I have a deer
but
tag
Montana
too.
has.
So,
Oh, dude,
so
that
excited.
is the perfect storm. So that's awesome. So you're going to Montana?
I got a combo tag. So the region I'm going to be hunting, I can get a brow tine bull and any deer. So,
dude, that's going to be
there's whitetail
awesome,
and muleys running
back,
around, but I'm gonna, unless it's a stallion of a whitetail, unless it gets me really excited, I don't know if I could bring myself to go all the way to drive all the way to Montana and shoot a freaking whitetail.
Shoot a whitetail. That's awesome, man. That's gonna be a lot of fun. So, like, you got a group of buddies or something? Anybody there
So do you know Mike Klingen, Montana Outdoor Imagery from Poma? So he's meeting me out there. My best childhood friend, one of my best buddies, is flying into Nashville on the 7th and driving out there with me. He's a super awesome guy. One of my best friends. He was a Navy Special Forces, recently retired, recently got married, and he's getting ready to move to Ohio, back to Ohio. So he's getting ready to move much closer to me than San Diego. So I pitched the idea of him driving out there with me and joining me on the hunt. And he was all in on it. So I'm super excited. We're right around. And then, like, my appetizer, I got archery opener next weekend in Kentucky at the farm. So, this weekend.
Yeah.
So Saturday.
Y'all have the chance to shoot velvet bucks over there. We don't. Though I'm excited because, like, as far as I know, this is going to be the first year that Texas's whitetail season is opening on September for archery. So it's September 30th, but
to start,
just a chance. It's probably going to be hotter than hell anyway.
I was melting.
You might try to go sit in the stand.
That deer right there. So I shot him last year. In velvet, and he was I couldn't touch him without just the ticks. The ticks were unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. They were so bad. So I got him. I got his head cut off. I knew he was going to do a Euro mount. I want somebody to put the fuzzy back on, but I stripped it off. But anyway, so I got his head cut off. And then before I went and peeled it, I was trying to figure out what to do with those ticks. And so we have I hope my dad doesn't listen. We have a chest freezer, and I took a contractor's bag and I put that thing. And he's pretty narrow. I think he was like 14 and maybe 13 and a half inches inside spread. So I was able to fit him in the freezer, and I closed that freezer and I froze him solid for like 48 hours so I could kill all those ticks off of him. Yeah, my
ticks
like,
off
don't
of it.
you
Yeah.
dare put that thing in the freezer. It's in a trash bag. Yeah.
That's funny. That's funny. It's like, I'll clean it out, I promise.
I didn't know what else
man,
to do.
Well, that's awesome. Man.
Yep. It should be a fun
Right?
fun couple of weeks, fun September. I'm really looking forward to it.
Dude, that's awesome, man. Well, good luck, dude. I'll definitely be following along and see. Hopefully, you get an elk and a mule deer.
I hope
awesome,
so.
Man.
Yep, I appreciate that. I'll do my best.
Heck yeah, man. Well, after you get back, we'll have to hop on and do a little recap, whether you get one or not. I love hearing about people going hunting and stuff, especially out west, because I got to go to Idaho for the first time last year. I'm not going this year, but I'm really want to go to New Mexico, or try to go to New Mexico next year. Either do the Scimitar Oryx hunt that they have out there, or try to go shoot an antelope or something.
You can go so I worked for the Forest Service in the Guadalupes down there, and like outside of Carlsbad. There's a big sheep out there. There's a big Barbary running around, but they're hard to find. It's like when I was looking for them, you'd look for like the gnarliest, like no possible chance any life form. Like I'd be surprised to see a bird hanging out up there, and like that's where they'll be. So they're really cool.
Exactly. I got a chance. Yeah, I might go do a guided. Well, I'm not going to be hunting, but I might go guide on a trip out in the Davis Mountains. Hopefully this winter for Aoudad. So yeah, they're one of my.
I've never shot one. I've always wanted.
Like a lot of people. I've never shot one either, but like a lot of people like Aoudad. Like sometimes, but like I freaking love them. I can hunt them all day. Now, would I'd rather have big horns than Aoudad? Yeah. Probably, but I like the Aoudad too.
It's one of those things where like I don't know. I don't know enough about the. I don't know how long, like if you extirpate an Aoudad from the landscape, like say they've been native to a range for a certain period of time, like at what point is it safe? Like I think brucellosis is one of the big ones or something that they're worried about transmitting, or scabies. There's a couple different things they're worried about getting transmitted. And like I said, I want to speak out of pocket, but I'd be really curious to know how long an area has to be, devoid of Aoudad before you can put bighorns back on the landscape.
Yeah, that would be something interesting to see. Like I've seen a couple things. Wild Sheep Foundation's put out some videos, but I think it's something that they're starting to pay attention to a lot more. Than hopefully here soon we'll have some more information.
And like having to ship those things around to different mountain ranges all the time is just not viable. It might be working, but we need to come up with some solutions. So it's been fun, man. I can talk conservation all night long. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for having me. This is a little bit later than we were shooting
no problem
for,
at all.
But we got her done.
Hey, man, it works, man. It works. Well, cool, man. Like I said, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Everybody, Whetstone Habitat, give him a follow. Sign up for the newsletter. He's got a lot of information. As you can tell, we just got just barely to the tip of the iceberg. So hopefully, like I said, good luck on your hunt, man. We'll have you back on the podcast to talk about that. So thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next week.
Brandon. Thanks for having me.